Folklore is a title that has flown under the radar for a lot of gamers. Developed by the now non-existent Game Republic and released exclusively for the PS3 in 2007, it seems to have been overshadowed by a load of other huge releases of the time, such as the console versions of Oblivion and Mass Effect. I played Folklore for the first time quite a few years ago, and there's a few things that really stood out to me, such as the dark atmospheric art design and mythological fairy tale setting, which is something that you don't see too often. The way that Folklore combines elements of action, adventure, role-playing, and graphic storytelling is why this game is definitely a title worth checking out. Unfortunately, this one isn't the easiest RPG to access, as there is yet to be a digital release. But if you can get your hands on it, then Folklore is one hell of a unique, memorable ride. Have you ever played this hidden gem? Let me know in the comments. Also, if you like this video and RPGs in general, be sure to hit the like and sub buttons, it'll help me out a lot. Alright, let's get into it. The story starts off with a detective, Keats, receiving a phone call from a distraught woman pleading for help. Curiosity gets the best of him, and just like any detective would, he travels to the village of Doolan in hope of a career-changing news story. At the same time, a young woman, Ellen, is contacted by her mother, who she hasn't seen in 17 years. Shocked by this, she too packs her bags and heads to Doolan. Upon arrival, these two protagonists cross paths, only to witness a lady sitting on the edge of a cliff, who falls to her death into the ocean below. Did she just slip on a banana, or was it a murder? One thing's for sure, this is only the start of things to come. Aside from this serious murder mystery narrative that happens in the real world, there is also another story that runs parallel in the fantasy world called the Netherworld. You see, Ellen and Keats are granted abilities to procure and control the powers of folks who are fairy tale creatures of the Netherworld. Both characters begin by entering the fairy realm in an attempt to speak to the dead, which will help them resolve the murders in the real world. However, it soon becomes more complicated as they become caught up in these netherworld politics. While this second story isn't nearly as interesting as the main plot, it still adds some enjoyment, and eventually the two plots do tie together, which results in some pretty badass moments. So, the story of Folklore is a typical murder mystery with loads of twists and turns and moments of genius. The final hours of the game is when it really hits its peak, and I couldn't help but rush through everything just so I could find the answers. To me, this was the best thing about Folklore. This engaging story is delivered in three ways. Firstly, we have these beautiful cutscenes reserved for key events. These look amazing, but unfortunately, it's the only time you'll hear voice acting, which is a bit of a shame because these cutscenes don't happen nearly as much as I would have liked. Next, we have this 2D style used when two characters are conversing. There are a lot of these, and they aren't anything special. Now, it's the third method of story delivery that I really loved. Most of the main story events unfold through a comic book style layout, and these look fantastic. The camera scrolls through the pages and each cell appears to be 3D with its own camera view that changes throughout the scene. These were really cool, but full voice acting here would have taken them to the next level. As mentioned before, there are two main characters that you can take turns controlling. The paths that Ellen and Keats take are very similar to one another, and this was my biggest issue with Folklore. Each of the first 5 chapters are dedicated to a realm in which both characters must complete for their own reasons, which always relate to the murders in the real world. You must eventually complete each chapter with each character, but the order is completely up to the player. Eventually, these two characters will come together and you'll have the choice of who to control in the final stages of the game. While this system deserves praise for giving us two different points of view, it can get repetitive and predictable, and aside from some of the enemies, the realms are the exact same. I'm a big fan of being offered different angles to view the story, but I felt that this could have been done a little better to reduce this repetition. The art style of Folklore was one of my favourite things about the game, and it really has me begging for a remaster. Each of the realms have such distinct, unique features, and every time I entered a new area, all I wanted to do was look around at the stunning environments. The art design also sets the mood perfectly for the village of Doolan. It's isolated and completely haunting, which fits perfectly with the tone of the game. The folk also look great and are well designed. Well, most of them. There are over 100 folk in total, and they range from tiny, weedy little creatures to huge, powerful dragons. The problem is that a bunch of them are clones, meaning they're just palette swaps of other folk. I really hate it when games do this, it just feels so cheap. Now, onto the gameplay. This action battle system is fairly simple but still offers a lot of variety. Instead of fighting your own battles, you'll attack with the folk that you've acquired. You can equip 4 of these creatures at a time, each one being assigned to a face button on the controller. A typical setup for me was having a defense folk assigned to X, a quick melee folk assigned to square, and a couple of long range folk assigned to the other 2 buttons. Each folk also has its own element, and it's really just a matter of finding the enemy's weakness and choosing your folks accordingly. As mentioned before, there are over 100 folk in total, with each realm having about 10 different folks to capture. With this many creatures, there are a lot of ways to go about your battles if you acquire them all. I'll also make a mention to the way that you capture the folk. After smacking them around a few times, they'll emit a red aura, and from here you can use the PS3's 6-axis motion sensing to capture them. Now, I haven't seen this 6-axis used too often, so I thought it was great that Folklore did something in this area. Generally, I thought the combat worked pretty well, but there were a couple of things that annoyed me. Firstly is the repetition. As I said before, you have to go through the same realm twice, and from a gameplay perspective, this can be a chore, especially during the later couple of realms. The upside to this is that the folks do slightly change for each character, with some even having slight variations of moves. This does add a little bit of variety between the 2 characters, but it still feels like you're doing the same thing twice. My other issue with the combat is the performance. While you can only assign 4 folk at a time, you can still switch in other captured folks at any time by pausing the battle and entering this screen. After changing your folks, the screen vanishes, but there is a slight delay before the battle resumes again. This might not seem like much of an issue, but it can be a bit of an immersion killer since you'll be switching folk a lot. While definitely more of an action game, Folklore still has some RPG mechanics to customize your characters. In addition to gaining levels after absorbing wild folk, there are certain criteria that each folk has in order for them to reach a higher level. This is called releasing karma, and here's a couple of examples. Folk A will increase its attack power when it's had 50 kills, and Folk B might have to kill 10 of Folk F in order to increase its stats. Exploring all of the realms and unleashing the karma was a bit of fun, however it's certainly not essential, as finishing the game without grinding to release this karma is also very possible. If you haven't heard of Folklore before, guess what? Now you have. It may not be the biggest name in the world of PS3 RPGs, but Folklore is definitely one worth checking out. The best thing about this game is its unique story-focused murder mystery that's designed to keep you guessing every step of the way, and it does just that. The game also looks beautiful, and the whole mythological setting with loads of folks to find and capture was another standout feature. The only real issue was the repetitive nature of switching back and forth between the 2 characters, and also the slight technical issues when in combat. I highly recommend this game for those after a mature supernatural story with some unique ideas. Have you played or even heard of Folklore? Let me know in the comments. This was Hellfire RPGs, thanks for watching. If you liked this video, hit like and sub for more RPG content. See you next time.